Make sure you listen to my daddy's podcast right now. Is it best show in the world?
And this is the Cards Face Up podcast. I am your host, Mr. Ty Hill. Today I have a special guest. He's a journalist for the Baltimore Sun. He's the author of We Own the City, which is a novel about the gun trace task force corruption scandal in Baltimore City. He calls it a true story of crime, cops, and corruption. Mr. Justin Fenton, how are you, sir?
Hey, thanks for having me, Ty. Appreciate it.
Man, look, I want to say thank you for coming, first of all. It means a lot to us, to my guests, and I think even though we are getting played everywhere across the world, Baltimore is my home. That's a special part of me. So it's very important to bring on people that's actually speaking for my community, and I love that about what you're doing with this book, We Own the City. So I want to jump right into it. For those that do not know or understand what I meant by the gun task force corruption, the gun trace task force corruption whole ordeal going on. Okay, we're going to run it down. The gun trace task force investigation in 2017, 8 members of gun trace task force, which also goes by GTTF, a unit within the Baltimore City Police Department, BPD, were indicted and arrested on charges of racketeering, robbery, extortion, overtime fraud, and selling drugs seized during the operations. All 8 members of the task force have been sentenced to federal prison time. So this is a real story. It led to over 800 cases being overturned or dropped, and it's a big story in Baltimore, so I know all of y'all are familiar. I want to run down real quick just exactly what that federal time looks like for these officers right now. Wayne Jenkins, 25 years. Maurice Ward, 7 years. Hendricks, 7 years. Marcus Taylor, 18 years. Ram, 12 years. Gondo, 10 years. Allers, 15 years. And Herschel, 18 years. You chose to start your book off, and it kind of surrounded, it kind of spoke, it was really surrounding Lieutenant Wayne Jenkins. Why did you choose that? Tell me exactly who Wayne Jenkins is and his importance.
Yeah, Jenkins was the leader of the group at the time they got busted. He was seen as, within the police department, they thought he was like one of their best guys. They thought he was one of the best at getting guns at a time when officers maybe were pulling back after the Freddie Gray case and the uprising and the charges. Jenkins was one of those guys who was telling his bosses, we're going out there every night and we're doing our best, and we're going to get as many guns as we can off the street. And obviously, as it turned out, he was one of their worst officers. He was dealing drugs, he was robbing people. He was really directing what these officers were doing. In looking out at you have 8 officers charged. It's actually grown now to 14 or 15 since. But at the time, how do you focus in? How do you tell people a story they can follow? And I chose Jenkins because, again, of that duality of the praise and the criminality. And I sort of tried to trace his career. He started in 2003. I tried to trace his career along with all the different things going on in the BPD throughout those years. So you have zero tolerance. You have the focus on, so-called repeat violent offenders where they're bringing down the arrests. And he went through all that. So I could tell the story of the police department through Jenkins' story.
Got you. So, wow, you said it's up to 14 people right now. So that's deep. And of course, in my opinion, do you believe it's a lot more?
I think one of the things, I think an interesting thing about this case was that I think it shows that the corruption is maybe worse than we thought it was. I think what the guys who were doing it was doing is worse than we thought. But I also don't think it's quite as widespread as people think either. I think the feds have really tried to follow different leads and get people to flip and cooperate. And they have been bringing additional charges, but it's not like they've charged the entire force. But I do think there's probably a lot of uncharged people who they just couldn't build a case on who are still out there, unfortunately. Yeah.
Got you. One of the things that I found real funny, and I read your whole book, so congrats on making a great piece of material to read. And I encourage all of my listeners and subscribers to make sure you go out there and read it, listen. It's however you choose to get it, go ahead and get it, because it's a wonderful piece of information, especially being that I'm from here and I've seen the stuff go down firsthand, because of course it's our local news. But the book put a lot of things into play for me, and I read all the way. I think it was 24 chapters.
I don't even know, actually.
It's a lot of damn chapters. It's a
try to
lot
break
of
it up.
chapters. I've read all the way through, man, and I love how you touched on certain things. But one of the funniest things that I think you said on there was when you mentioned the knockers and the jump out boys. That was dope to me because not necessarily the knockers and jump out boys being dope, but the fact that it was your first time hearing that. You didn't know anything about knockers, and you're born from here. You were born here.
I knew about them, yeah, because as soon as I started covering the police department, that was one of the people were always complaining about the knockers and the jump out boys, and that's something that's been going on for decades here. Yeah.
Yeah. You touched on that. Well, it wasn't you per se, but a lot of people did not know what knockers was.
Yes, I definitely had to explain it for the wider audience. I wanted to make sure that, I didn't want to take for granted that people would know what that was. So you have to sort of walk it out and explain that, because some of these things are like sort of a Baltimore thing. I'm sure they have them in other cities, but not everywhere, and definitely not places where people aren't aware of how police and the Black community interact.
Got you. And for those that don't know, knockers and jump out boys is basically plainclothes cops. They come through. It's been known that they whoop your ass, whatever it is, if you run. It's been known to the public humiliation was one of the big things, and you touched on it for a second. And I would have loved to hear more about it, but I think those are the things that, to constantly, the more people become aware of these things, the more times it'll be reported. But you touched on it for a brief second inside of the book as far as the public humiliation. Like, for those in Baltimore, you've seen the knockers come around, jump out. They got you strip searching you in the middle of the street, got your dick all out and all things of sort, in front of the public, in front of, it's humiliation. And those things are some of the things that I thought was important to touch on.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing about the cases that, like, the officers, so a lot of times you get like one officer at a time getting busted. You get one officer charged for like excessive force, one officer charged maybe for even dealing drugs or stealing money. And they always sort of explain them away as like bad apples. And here you had people for years have been complaining about these officers. It's usually not on tape. The cell phone cameras, body cameras are a relatively new thing. So we have that. And then the officers, most of the officers flipped and said, yeah, this is what we do. And they sat on the witness stand and said, we would drive at groups of people really fast and slam on the brakes and pop open our doors. And if anybody ran, that's who we went after. And to hear them sort of verbalize that and admit it, I think, it's something that hasn't really happened. And I know residents have been saying it for a long time, but officers, so there's always this defense mechanism where they're like, well, this is what we're supposed to do. And we didn't do that, or we didn't do what he says we did. And the officers took the stand and said, no, that's what we do. We try to stop as many people on a night as we can to increase our chances of finding something, even if we don't have cause to do it.
Got you. And I love it. But you being what they would consider today a whistleblower, how's that for you? How does that work with your regular life? Is it a scary time? Because we listen to stories, and this is not just being from this community of things of sort. We listen to even testimonies inside of your book of people saying that they're suffering from post-traumatic, from experiences that they've had with Baltimore City Police. How does it work for you? You reporting this, and you're uncovering a lot of things to the eye that has never known none of this existed. Not by fault, I'm gonna say, because some people are blinded just to their world and they didn't see a lot of this stuff going on. But you're actually in the Black communities and you're seeing it going on. How does that feel to be that whistleblower? Is it kind of you're watching over your shoulder, you're paranoid about it, like?
Yeah, as I was, I can't take credit for uncovering this case. The feds uncovered it through a wiretap investigation. Really, it started with a county suburban drug investigation. There's some neighboring counties and their detectives were trying to, stop drugs coming into their community, and they stumbled onto this. And then the FBI did a wiretap. So, when the officers were charged, I try to tell people that, at the Baltimore Sun, we cover a lot of different aspects of the criminal justice system. We tend to cover homicides. People losing their life is an important thing. I've done, exposés on flawed rape investigations. We cover what's going on in different communities, policies, laws, court cases. And these drug officers was not an area of the department that I had really covered that much because, we don't cover, someone getting arrested with a bag of weed or bag of, whatever, or a handgun. Those tend to be the stories that make the news. We'd heard about some of these officers. Daniel Herschel, for example, had been covered a lot. He'd been put on blast by Young Moose, by one of our reporters who did a story on officers with repeat lawsuits. So he was no stranger to public attention. But for the most part, these guys were kind of, working in the shadows, because that's what the department wants them to do. They want them to ride around these unmarked cars, not in uniform, and do traffic stops and get guns. But as I was trying to peel away the layers of the onion and try to get more information, it was an uncomfortable thing, because again, I do think there are people who are uncharged, who probably fear getting charged, and I'm trying to expose them. So there was it's an uncomfortable thing. I'm also kind of hamstrung because people can tell me that someone did something. It doesn't mean I can necessarily report it. There's legal issues there with accusing someone of a crime when you can't prove it. But I was definitely wading into those waters during this process, and it was uncomfortable.
I can imagine. But like you said, it needs to be done. It's some of the things that needs to be done, and I think that's our civic duty to actually do those things, and especially with you being a part of such a big production as far as the Baltimore Sun. The radio and things of other, a lot of things work on request. Does the Baltimore Sun work like that? Does your job as a reporter, even if it wasn't for the Baltimore Sun, do you think that this topic is requested enough to actually, is it spoken about enough inside of the newspaper, because I don't see it a lot. I mean, we saw this and it kind of quickly disappeared, and it didn't show a lot more. It wasn't a lot of articles, because again, you just said that you peeled the layers of the onion back. This can go on. This could literally be in every publication every week, Yes. And do you feel as though other reporters are actually reporting this type of news, or are they not doing it out of fear and things of sort?
I think it's a natural thing for stories to go away, just like sort of run their course, when there's not when it's not apparent that there's something more to do, they can fall away. I happen to think that, I have been writing a lot of stories about it regularly. In fact, I was worried about being accused of continuing to write it to prop up the book. You know what I mean? But honestly, the story is not over. There is still stuff going on. There is still people getting charged. There is still accusations and lawsuits. And, the bail bondsman accomplice who helped Wayne Jenkins steal drugs, and he just got out of prison. And I sat down with him, and he told me more information. He showed me more pictures. He showed me a letter that Jenkins wrote him from jail. There's an internal review of the case that's being conducted by a former inspector general of the Justice Department, and he hasn't even filed his report yet. It's going to come out probably in the fall. So, I mean, the story's still going. Do I think there are aspects of it that should be covered more? I think that there's crimes that haven't been uncovered or charged. But the challenge there is how do you uncover them? How do you prove it? I have suspicions about certain things, but again, I can, it's not what there's that line of Denzel Washington in Training Day. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And if I can't prove that he did these things, or I don't have someone making that accusation sort of on the record, my hands are tied. But I think we've been doing a lot of coverage on it. I've personally been trying to make sure that it stays in the news and that people don't forget about it, because that's how things happen again. You have a regime change in the police department or city hall, and they all say, well, that was the last guy. That's not going to happen on my watch. And they let their guard down, and stuff can happen again. So I think it's important that they own it, learn from it, and don't forget it.
Got you. So I look at one of the things that you spoke on was the very, 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 very popular local DVD that ended up going worldwide, which was Stop Snitching. Even though you said stop fucking snitching, and I was laughing at that because I never knew, that was never the title that I knew of. You put the fucking in the middle, which is all good. You feel me?
I think that's what it was really called, but they changed it for, when it had to go in the family newspaper. Yeah.
No, we have you ever seen the original DVD cover?
Yeah.
I got it ain't no fucking on there, it's just Stop Snitching. But either way, I love that you touched that. If you're right, I owe you. I'm treat you to a beer or something. But I love how you spoke about that, and the Stop Snitching. The reason why is our community lives by this code of no snitching, stop snitching, but it's looked upon and frowned upon by everybody on the outside, even down to police officers, as being the worst code in the world. Me personally, I'm not saying it's a good code or a bad code. I'm just saying, giving my sides of it. So it's looked at as being the worst thing in the world. Oh, stop snitching. Nothing happens. Nothing gets taken care of. But police officers live by this same code of conduct.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, and so, yeah, one of the things that's interesting about the Stop Snitching video is that they say they're not talking about everybody. They're not talking about someone calling the police on someone who killed their son or something. They're saying that, like, people who are in the game shouldn't be giving up other people, who are doing it with them in order to get, like, a lighter sentence, that you should have a code of honor among your, fellow people who are doing this stuff. I think that's what they tried to say it was really about. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's, coming forward and being a witness, no matter what the issue is a very difficult thing. And I think we hear a lot about why won't people come forward? And it's like, because coming forward is hard. It's dangerous. There's retaliation. It's not, I mean, who wants to go into witness protection? Who wants to relocate either across the city or to another state? I mean, it's a lot that comes with that. And it does get oversimplified into, like, how come people won't cooperate? It's not that simple. Similarly, with the police department, definitely there's an issue of officers who don't want to tell on their own. And even those who do, there's a character in the book, Ryan Gwynn, who suspects that the officers he's working with are up to something, and he goes forward, but he doesn't have proof. And he all of a sudden feels exposed. He feels like, oh my gosh, I went forward and told on these guys, but, like, nothing happened to them, and I got to see them. I got to still work with them, and, made him uncomfortable. And he would have nightmares about it. So, I mean, it's definitely an issue that gets oversimplified.
I totally agree. Speaking of that oath that I feel as though the police live by as well as us, as well as the community that they complain living by it. We have the Sean Suiter situation, and you discussed that, I believe, about a chapter or two inside of the book. What's your opinion? Do you believe that it was a suicide? Just personal opinion.
I don't know. Especially one of the things I learned researching this book is that a lot of times you don't know the truth, and it might take years for it to come out. What I tried to do is look at what we do know, what's available. And I think that anyone who reads the book will, probably come away with the idea that I think there's a compelling argument that it was suicide. I think it's a hard pill to swallow. It seems hard to believe that someone would do that or think they could pull that off. To think that you could go out with another officer, at dusk when it's kind of still light outside and shoot yourself in the head and make it look like a homicide. Like, that seems far-fetched. And yet a lot of the stuff we've seen play out since then does seem to support that, in terms of physical evidence, in terms of witnesses, in terms of just certain things that happened, including the fact that he'd been confronted by the feds with an accusation that he had planted drugs on someone, something that could send him to prison, that could end his career. But those are theories, those are theories. We don't know. And so I try to lay out everything, because I know that people in the community, people in the department, they're very torn about this, and people have strong feelings. And I wanted to just say, okay, I know what you think. I know what you think you've heard, but, like, here's all the information that I was able to come across, and just push it into the, turn the cards up.
Shameless plug.
and really, just so I want people to make up their own minds. If people read it and think that it was a hit, or that it, either by police or by someone in the community, I'm really not trying to change your mind. If they think it's a suicide, I want them to see that information, because we don't know, and it's still classified as an open homicide, and it's going to remain so, it seems. But there's a lot of conflicting information.
It really is. I think before I read the book, I had my own suspicion of exactly what I thought about it. And then reading the book, like you said, so much information is put out there that makes you you're stuck inside that middle, and you just got to choose a side. One of the biggest things I think, and sorry, you tell me if there's too much to tell about the book without them reading, but you received a phone call. You were there at the hospital where Suiter passed away, before he passed away, right after it happened, and you received a phone call telling you that it was a hit, that it wasn't suicide, that it was an actual setup. And that was before that's what I noticed, that was before it came out that he was supposed to testify in front of a grand jury.
Yeah. I ultimately don't think that person knew what they were talking about, but I include it because honestly, for me in that moment, that's like one of the only moments in the whole book that I put myself in the story where I use like and I describe something I'm doing, because in that moment it was like, holy shit, it made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It was like, whoa, like, and I'm thinking to myself, so what the person called and told me was this was a hit, like there's a manhunt going on, there's a reward being put out. Everybody's talking about this officer got shot. And I get this call saying that he was due to testify in court, the next day. I'm like, there's no court proceedings in this case. I've been watching this case like a hawk. There's nothing going on. And it turned out there was a grand jury proceeding the next day. And when that came out, I was like, wow. But ultimately, having continued to speak with that person, I think they just happened to hit on, I think that they had a hunch that happened to be true, and they didn't actually know what they were talking about. But I wanted to create that drama for the reader that I felt in that moment. So I kind of cheated a little bit.
I'm not even going to call it a cheat, because listening to you, and although you're trying to draw me back, like pull me back, like I might have, I don't think so. I'm still feeling what that person say. I mean, that would have to be a hell of a lucky guess.
If you knew who the person was, I don't think they knew what they were talking about.
All right, so I got you on that. So, Ben, you grew up in Baltimore City, you said, right?
No, I grew up in Anne Arundel County.
Okay.
Outside Annapolis, yeah.
Got you. So, do you believe, well, you at least been around reporting it and you've seen it. I mean, you was at the unrest and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah, I've worked for the Sun since 2005, and I've covered the city crime since 2008.
Okay, cool. So you're very familiar. Do you believe that since this has happened, which was, 5-6 years now, that the city is doing what they're supposed to do as far as disciplinary actions, as far as getting inside of the problems and making sure they find out who these officers are before they're put out in the street, things of sort? Do you feel like they're doing a better job? Did this wake the city up, or no, it's just the same bullshit from what you...
Yeah, that's a real tough question. I mean, honestly, what's so shocking about the Gun Trace Task Force story is that this was going on post Freddie Gray. After Freddie Gray died, everybody said things are going to change around here. We're going to have the consent decree. We're going to have the Justice Department investigation. We're going to clean this department up. And the Gun Trace Task Force stuff is going on while that's occurring. That was so striking to me when that kind of like, I realized writing the book that hadn't been underscored enough, that I needed to layer over all the talk that's going on, the press conferences, the task forces that are being set up to investigate this stuff, and the fact that they're robbing people like the same day, the day they announced the results of the Justice Department civil rights investigation that found all these, it's hundreds of pages detailing how people's rights are being violated, strip searches, as you spoke about, all kinds of things. The members of the GTTF hit the streets that night and violated people's rights. And so if we're thinking that this is an agency that can fix itself, that was a real slap in the face and a wake-up call that there's a lot more work to be done now. As far as how things stand now, I really don't know that I can speak to that, because I don't know what I don't know. I think that's up to the citizens to tell us that they think this police department is getting better. I know that the consent decree does call for rewriting a ton of policies. It calls for new training. I know that, I think they have a heavy hand right now when it comes to discipline, although again, those cases have to be made first. I just went to a department trial board, which is a disciplinary hearing where an officer gets charged with stuff internally and they can fire him. And an officer's brought up on charges and they wanted to bring down the hammer and fire him for something that maybe people might think is not that big of a deal. And a prosecutor came to the hearing and testified in his defense, and he gets to stay on the force. So, I mean, I think there's the other thing, I could talk about this forever, but this is a very not transparent process. They tell us they're fixing things, but we can't see it. And so in this last General Assembly session, they passed a law that really is going to open up a lot of stuff. And it's going to be incredible. I mean, for the first time, we're going to really be able to take a look at things we weren't able to take a look at before, things that were hidden, things that, were the reasons why things perhaps happened. And that's going to change. I think it's October, but it might be next July. It's just tough to say, because we've heard these things before. Every commissioner I covered said, it's a new day. The guy before me did a terrible job, but I'm fixing this place up. And then the next guy says the exact same thing about the last guy. So I don't know. It's tough to say. Do you have any opinions about that?
I think I'm over the new sheriff in town shit. I'm gonna be honest. It's bad because, you know, again, this is why I wanted you on the show. I've seen this shit my whole life. You know, I'm from East Baltimore, so you know, officers like Herschel, we know these officers. You know, and those things are scary. That's the fear that we've been growing up with our whole life. And, you know, to see people see it now, it was a good eye opener for a lot of people. Like, it was a scene, it was a part inside of the book when I believe someone at the police station was crying, and because they couldn't believe how many people had been put away from these guys, how many people have been, I mean, we got not just jail time for these people. We have people that have been murdered, people that have lost their lives, innocent people, not just people that was breaking law and things of sort. I mean, jail is not a good place. No matter what the fuck they try to tell you in the world, jail is not a good place, and everyone cannot make it in jail. So you're sending certain people to jail that might not have supposed to have been there. You know, these setups, this shit is literally like a movie, and it's crazy because I don't think the world knew it, but we've seen it, and we've been complaining and complaining and complaining. The neighborhoods have been complaining for years. And I mean, these guys went to jail and stuff, and they've opted out. You know what? The highest sentence is Jenkins, which is 25 years. But the guy that had this uncovered, what's his name? Shropshire.
Yeah.
Shropshire, the guy who they were investigating that played a big part in this. I mean, he cooperated with the police, gave a lot of the accounts, working with Jenkins and everything. He ended up with 25 years.
For a nonviolent drug crime too, yeah. Mm-hmm.
My question, all right, so at the time of them saying that they fixed this shit, or they're fixing it.
There go the dogs. Sorry about that.
Now y'all good. At the time of them saying they're fixing this shit, you still gave someone 25 years, which is what you gave the person that's supposed to have been the worst of all this shit. It's the exact same time. And the difference from these two people, again, is I don't believe that a citizen should be held to the same standards as a police officer and vice versa.
You're absolutely right. I mean, people get 20 years for holding up a 7-Eleven, and these guys got 18 for robbing lots and lots of people, tarnishing their badge, stealing money from taxpayers. I will say for Shropshire, I want to clarify one thing. He did. I do outline a scene in the book where he sits down and sort of gives some information about officers he knows that are dirty, but he's not a cooperator, and that's part of why he got such a long sentence. He went to trial and got convicted, but I want to make sure, especially based on our earlier conversation about snitching, that he didn't cooperate in that case.
Okay, cool. Thanks for doing that too. So not even cooperating, but still, he didn't do as fucking much as these guys literally fucked lives up for years.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's some young ones on there, but you got people out there 7 years. I mean,
that's what you get for cooperating. Yeah, I mean, honestly, Herschel and Taylor went to trial. They're accused of doing the same things the guys who got 7 years did, but you go to trial, you get 18. And that's an example of how that goes for regular people too. You plead, you cooperate, you get time off, you go to trial, they hit you hard.
And sadly, it was people doing that. I mean, you spoke about that. And us, we all know people that had to do it. You know, you sit down like, fuck it. I know if I take it to trial, I'm going to lose. They're going to smash me. I mean, that's what we say in Baltimore. They're going to smash me. You know, and they had to take charges that they didn't do. You know, whether it's a night in prison. I mean, what's the name got out after 7 years? What was the guy's name that came home after 7 years?
Oh, an officer or?
No, one of the say it again.
No one's home yet.
No, it was one of the people that they planted stuff on. I think the guy
yeah. Umar Burley and Brent Matthews. Yeah. Burley spent 7 years locked up. Yeah.
That's 7 years. And that, again, not saying he's innocent for everything in the world. None of us are. But I want to be fucking arrested for that. Don't catch me for another motherfucking crime or somebody else's crime. I mean, it's so in my opinion, I know I'm dragging that on, but my opinion, no, I don't believe that it's being tackled the way that it should be. I don't believe change is being done the way that it should be. I mean, we look at these officers' career. A lot of them had infractions already. A lot of them already before and they were being fucking pushed up more. And one of the things that you said inside that book that was dope was they made a team of fucking a bunch of crooks.
Yeah.
They created a super, this shit is like the Voltron of crooks.
It is.
Like
it's crazy.
They created that shit.
It's extraordinary because the feds are listening in on Gondo and Raham's phone, and they're working with, you know, a couple other guys. Like Jenkins has his own squad that's doing the same stuff. And in the middle of the, like, you couldn't, honestly, like you said earlier, it's like a movie. Like in the middle of their investigation, this other corrupt squad, they joined forces, and like, you know, you wonder if Jenkins might not have got caught if he hadn't been happened to be transferred. You know, there's one part in the book that, you know, the feds told me that they thought Jenkins was a great cop because of his reputation, and they almost brought him into the fold, like had him wear a wire and we're going to tell him what was going on. Can you imagine if Wayne Jenkins was like the hero who brought down Gondo and Raham, only to probably be discovered on his own later? I mean, like, that would have been a disaster. So like, what's one of the things I get to, by being able to talk with the investigators, I can chronicle some of the things that didn't work and almost didn't work. But yeah, it's a really crazy thing. And I also, again, just to go back to what you're talking about fixing the department, I mean, you throw in all the defund conversations, and that's a whole other thing. It's a really interesting thing.
What I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, for decades, I'm doing research right now on the 60s and 70s. There was some stuff I came across in the research for this book that I want to keep looking into. And you could take some of these articles from the 60s and reprint them today, and it's the same. It's people saying cops can't solve the problem. These are deeper problems. You know, we're only a Band-Aid. There's not, you know, there was a police chiefs conference in like St. Louis in like 1968 where the keynote speaker was like, the dirty secret is that we actually can't fix these problems. We, you know, they're deeper issues. And so here we are in 2021, you know, talking about that. Although I don't know that it's going to be a seamless thing to shift these resources. I think everybody kind of like knows that it's the right thing to do, but they're afraid to do it. They're afraid that like all hell might break loose, and then it will be like, oh, I can't believe you did that. And so, you know, there's this lesser approach that says, you know, well, don't just strategically cut away the police department and reallocate those funds to where they can really help. And I think that, you know, the mayor kind of campaigned on saying he was going to do that, but he hasn't really done it yet. He hasn't even stood up the work group to look into it. And, you know, I think it's going to be a very gradual process if they can do it at all due to the consent decree, which calls for increased funding to put more officers on the street so they can hypothetically do a better job. So it's a really crazy time, but I'm excited because these conversations are occurring that really haven't been occurring in the past. You know, we talk about it, but it wasn't really something that officials were actually interested in doing. I think there's like deeper conversations taking place now, maybe. Preliminary.
I mean, I think outside it's just going to take people from the outside to give a fuck. That's one of the biggest things. And that's why, again, shedding light on certain issues that wasn't noticeable to a lot of people. And although I believe a lot of people play blind eye, just like I believe a lot of people that isn't arrested right now that were cops, you know, whether you were actively doing it with, you knew that it was going on, and it was your duty to point that shit out. And it wasn't getting pointed out. I mean, we think about all these guys came from, like we just said, from different places. All of them. That means that you had crews on these places too that was also down with this. I mean, it's and one of the things that I believe that you said, this shit was taught from somewhere. You know, so that's when you go back to what you were saying about the 60s and the 70s. You know, it was taught from somewhere. And then we also have to understand that back in the unrest days, you know, that was what the Pennsylvania Avenue and all of that things, when that was going on, you had cops literally refuse to work. They were just standing there, you know, while shit happened for a while. And it was like a free for all everywhere. And that's the fucked up part about it, because that wasn't 8 cops. That was more than 8 cops. And that means majority of these cops are still on the street. You know, and that's a scary thing for us as raising children and things of sort. It's scary. So you think about when you're talking about defund, and again, what's your stance on that? Do you think defund is the thing, or?
You know, again, my job is to hear all the different sides, and I think that I think it's an interesting conversation. I want to learn more about it. I want to see how it would be implemented. And but I can't say I have an opinion on it because I feel like it's like an unknown right now. Like, what would it look like? How would it work? I know that I know that I think everybody kind of can agree that more money for like things that actually help people not get into crime is the way to go. But the idea of like slashing the department, but just like all of a sudden reducing the number of officers by half or 75%, like what does that look like? Like what do they do? So I mean, I just want to learn more about it. And I'm hoping that they will sort of stand up that task force that's supposed to look into it and try to make some recommendations.
Yeah, I agree. I think we at the place that nobody really knows what the fuck it is. I actually did an episode on it, and I really still don't know because it hasn't been done. So it's like we don't even have a view of what it will fucking look like. Other than craziness. I shout out to all the programs throughout the city that's actually doing weekend free violence and week free violence or 7-day challenges and all that shit that's happening in these communities because that's dope. You spoke big about when you saw the Bloods and the Crips uniting and things of sort. That shit was dope, because I believe that it's not necessarily only policing our own communities. I believe that it's time to police our own communities with support of the police.
Yeah, and
that's what I would want to see.
And there's definitely like a ton of residents that I've met over the years, who I think that, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but like they're the ones calling 911 on their neighbors. Like they call 911 and say, get these kids off the street, get them off my, the stoops that are painted with like no loitering, they want the police to clean up their neighborhoods. And I think there's one argument to be made that that's the only option they have, right? So they're calling because that's the only option they have. And if we had other things, maybe that could take the place. But I think there's a lot of residents in the city who would be very fearful about the idea of reducing the police presence. And so it's not everybody's not on the same page here. There's activists who are doing their job and they're trying to bring these issues to light and trying to make sure that the officials don't turn the page. But there's a lot of residents who are not, as loud, and they're not on social media, and they have a very strong opinion about this too. So it's a complicated issue, and I think our mayor is in the middle of that. I think that he got elected as a progressive, and he's also from Park Heights, and he has family and friends, and who live in the streets and who live in the neighborhoods where they're saying, please do not pull the cops out of here. We think that would be bad, and he's trying to work through that.
Yeah, we went to school together. We both went to Mervo. Okay. So I think the best quote I read in your book, and it's something that I probably fucking named this episode after. You said, Baltimore Black communities have both been over-policed and under-policed. And I know we've been touching on that here. Do you explain that into detail? Because I think that sentence was so fucking powerful because it's the truth. And it's such an oxymoron at the same time, but we've been over-policed and under-policed. But from your perspective of a reporter and the outside looking in, explain exactly what you meant.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the idea that, police who are looking to drive down crime are looking for the fastest results, and they will stop you as you're walking down the street, not doing anything. They will drive into a group of people. They will pull over a car for a tail light being out and end up searching the whole thing. And you're being over-policed. That's not what you want. You don't want everybody to feel as though every move they make is going to end up with a search by police or a stop or whatever. And yet there's all these unsolved murders and all these unsolved crimes. And I think in some ways it's a vicious cycle, because I think that maybe in the 80s, maybe the 90s, people did stop cooperating with police as much, probably because of the way police treated them. But, it's a chicken and egg thing. And so with less tips and less cooperation, police got more aggressive, trying to make things happen. There's one part where the GTTF refer to themselves as the make stuff happen police. I thought that was really interesting that they use that phrase, because they're trying to make something happen. They don't know who's committing the crimes. They're going to figure it out. They're going to go in there and turn over your bed and tear apart your dresser and, find something to tie you to a crime.
Or pull up and just hope that you run.
Yeah. And so it's like, so you're getting over policed. They're suffocating the community, trying to drum up something, and it's not the way that they're going to actually solve some of these really serious crimes and make relationships with members of the community so that they can make that progress.
I got you. I know we said that we was gonna.
Dogs again.
It's all good, man. We're gonna start wrapping up anyway. One of the biggest questions that I wanted to ask, and we'll end it on this: who the fuck runs the city?
Well,
Who,
you know,
who the fuck owns the city? Because your book is titled "We Own the City," and then I got to the end, and I was like, "Wow, you're
there you
a
go.
powerful
See,
fucking writer."
and that wasn't planned. Like, so the epilogue, I catch up with one of the members of the Crips, Charles Shelley, who really looked out for me during the rioting. I went into the center of Pennsylvania North. You know, I'm a reporter. I want to be there. I want to see it. I want to hear about it later. And he's like, you're going to get fucked up. He's like, you are a sitting
you almost
duck.
did.
So he throws his arm around me, and I'm like, oh man, this is weird. Like, people don't throw their arms around people who they're gonna, like, you know, I'm a stranger, and what does he care about me? And then so I felt like a baby. I felt like you know, like I'm fine. I can take care of myself. And as soon as I left, someone tried to rob me. Someone tried to steal my cell phone. They sprayed pepper spray on me. This guy with his hoodie tied tight over his face, and I like retreated back over to Charles and his buddies and kind of just stay with them for the rest of the time. But you know, I've been meaning to meet up with him for years. I'd gotten his information at the time. I didn't do it at first. Then he moved away. His number got changed. I found him on Facebook at one point, but it just didn't happen. And so around like the 5-year anniversary of the Freddie Gray death and everything that happened, you know, and I just, with George Floyd going on, I was like, I got to find this guy. And I found he'd moved back to Baltimore, and we hung out and we talked. And, you know, he said something to me. The book was finished. The book was finished at this point. There was no epilogue. And I was just doing this because I wanted to meet him. And we were talking about it. He's like, you know, he said to me, people in these neighborhoods, and this is what I was speaking to a moment ago, they don't want murders going on. They don't want drug dealing going on. They want their neighbors to be safe in places where their kids can play and they feel safe. And he's like, but you know, the officers aren't going to get there because people don't trust them, and the people don't want to work with them. And it occurred to me that, like, you know, yeah, it's the residents can, you know, if the cops feel like they own the city and they can run roughshod on them and do whatever they want, they're alienating the people who really own the city, which is the taxpayers, the people who live here, who set down roots, who go back, you know, generations, and, you know, like they're the ones who own the city. So I like that moment where people get to the end and go,
it's like an moment.
Yeah.
No, I think I found that pretty fucking dope, because I totally agree, man. We own the city. We own the city. We run the city. It is the people who does it, and that's one of the things that we need the police to know, that you work for the people. And let's get out here and actually try to connect with the people. That's one of the biggest things. Those relationship buildings is the thing that matters. That's why you were able to walk through that neighborhood with that guy, because he was able to build relationships throughout his community. It ain't a scared thing of him. It ain't none of that shit. It's a, hey, we respect that guy. We know that guy. That's a familiar face. Those things matter. And inside these communities, those things matter too, as far as the police and any other fucking agency that's out there supposedly stopping crime and things of sort. You need to get out there and actually fucking be with the people. It scares me that majority of the polices are not from here. That's scary, because you don't really have no love. It's the same thing that they say when, you know, you're going to somebody else's neighborhood, you know, or somebody else's house, or, hey, you know what they say about them Section 8 people, or they won't take care of it because it ain't their property. It's the same thing when it comes to, you know, it was different when these officers had to live inside these fucking communities. You know, so you wanted to slow things down. You wanted to get things back. And I think that it can be done. I think Baltimore can be a beautiful fucking place. We just have to do it. Last thing I wanted to ask you too, my homeboy today actually. And I was like, wow, damn, I got him coming on my show today. He's actually about to be in the We Own the City movie or TV show.
I was wondering if you're going to bring that up. Yeah.
I just fucking found out probably an hour or two ago.
No, it's so honestly, the way this book came about, I never planned on writing a book. I'm a newspaper reporter. I want to do the best job I can as a newspaper reporter. But during the trial, David Simon, the creator of The Wire and someone who used to do my job at the paper in the 80s and 90s, he reached out to me and said, this is a great story. This is a book, you know, and I think I want to make a show. And so from then on, I decided, okay, let me see what I can do. Let me try to wrap up, 13 years of reporting on this stuff and see if I can pull it off. And it was hard. I mean, I ended up with Random House, which is fantastic. They're they're like the best publisher, but it took a while. I was working on the proposal for like a year and I thought I was going to blow it. But yeah, he's making it into an HBO miniseries, 6 parts. They start filming soon. And be on TV at some point, probably next year or at the late fall in the earliest. But got a great cast, and I'm involved. I'm involved as a consultant. So they ask me a lot of questions about what did this look like. They want to make it as real as they can, and it's real exciting stuff. It's all the creators of The Wire, Ed Burns, George Pelecanos, David Simon. It's all and so it's pretty cool. What is your buddy? Man. Can you tell me? Well, I'll ask you offline what your buddy's playing because that's he didn't
tell me that, but his name is Chris. So he was actually in The Wire. So now that you're saying that the creators of The Wire is actually the ones that did it, that makes it dope. I literally just saw this maybe about an hour before we started recording when he said it, and he posted the title of the book, and I was like, "We own the city." So wow, I got him. I'm actually about to record with him in a couple minutes and shit. So I was laughing at it, and I just thought that was God speaking. So I'm glad that we did get a chance to see that so that I could be able to help you promote that. Congratulations, brother. You have a wonderful fucking book. I hope that you continue to uncover these things that some people are playing blind eye to.
Yeah, no, the bar's been raised. Yeah.
It is. It has. And we owe you for that because it's important that people come out there and do those same things. Like I was trying to get off earlier, but I kind of think I got tongue twisted or something. Same way that the radio has people that request songs and things of sort. We're requesting these type of write-ups to be done. We're requesting these type of things to be done because it needs to be seen outside of these communities because it's going to take outside help to also get these communities where they're supposed to be. And it's not because...
I don't want to wait till the next indictment to write about officers. If any of your listeners, if there's still officers like this that are doing this stuff, I want to know about it. And again, it might be hard to write about. It might be hard to get the proof, but I want to know, and I want to be on the front end this time as opposed to trying to pick up the pieces after a huge indictment drops.
Got you. Look, Justin, over here at the Cards Face Up podcast, we salute you. We thank you for coming through, man. I wish you nothing but success. Continue to kill them out here. And for everybody out there listening or watching, whatever you're doing, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Justin, can you tell them how to get in touch with you if that's something that you want to do?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm on Twitter, Justin_Fenton. My email address is at the bottom of all my articles at BaltimoreSun.com, Instagram, all that stuff. So, yeah.
Got you, brother. Got you. We salute you for coming through, man. I hope to see you again very, very, very soon, man. Especially you owe us on your next project to bring it here too, all right?
And I'm going to look up that stop fucking snitching thing because
I know. Yeah, and if not, you owe me a beer. That's
thank you so much.
Thank you, Justin. Justin Fenton, everybody. Make sure y'all go ahead and follow him, man. Salute, brother.
See ya.